What actually is Overwatch 2? It's a question many of us have been asking since the sequel was first announced back in 2019, and now that I've played its PvP beta, I'm still not entirely sure what the answer is. RPS staffer Ed has also been playing, so we sat down to hash out our feelings about the Overwatch 2 beta, its new content, and what this in-development build implies about Blizzard's vision for the final release. Enjoy. So Ed, we've been playing a bit of the Overwatch 2 beta, and we have some thoughts about it, don't we?
Yeah, some mixed and some positive, I think.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I think I'm skewing a little bit more onto the positive side than you are, but before we dive into some specifics, shall we just have a chat about our broader opinions about the Overwatch 2 beta? So where do you stand currently with Overwatch 2?
So I think it's not a substantial change. If you're kind of like a lapsed player like I am, like I used to play this game a disgusting amount. Like stay up till 3 a.m. each night kind of thing and like grind out ranks and get really stressed out. That was me like a few years ago. And I kind of just was like, you know what, I need to just take a break from this game. Like it just wasn't doing anything for me aside from like raise my blood pressure to like to extraordinary levels.
I know that feeling.
So now coming back to Overwatch 2, to me, there's no reason for me to kind of to go back and play Overwatch 2 like I used to, having played the beta and stuff like that. I think a lot of people will say that it kind of feels a bit like Overwatch 1.1, or that Overwatch 2 could have been like a big patch, I suppose. I don't know if that's like strictly true, and I suppose we'll like get into that. But at least for me, sort of coming back to the game, there is no reason for me to continue. It's not done a lot for me, really.
Yeah, that's it. I get that. When I played it earlier this week or over the weekend, I played about 3 hours and felt the same. The changes felt more like a substantial balance patch rather than a numbered sequel. And I did think to myself, I played so much of this between 2016 and 2017. I don't know whether or not it has enough going for it to pull me back in that same way, the same that you've said. But I played it for 2 hours last night and something clicked. But what I will say is, I don't think it was anything specific to Overwatch 2. I think I just love Overwatch so much. I was just happy to be back into the, that space where I was enjoying it again. I do wonder if I'd just gone back to the original Overwatch and played some, whether I would have had that same connection, and I think I probably would have. But I do think that if you are an Overwatch fan, you are just going to like Overwatch 2 because it is just the same as Overwatch 1 with some minor changes. If you are not interested in Overwatch and you're thinking Overwatch 2 might be the game that gets you into it, based on this PvP section, I don't think you're going to enjoy it. I think it's just the same. There's nothing here that's going to draw you in. It probably is worth mentioning that the way that Overwatch 2 is being packaged is strange from what we know about it. There is this big PvE mode that we're not privy to yet, which is what I'm really excited for. That is more of a co-op experience where you can customize your character's loadouts. It feels like a lot of the work is probably going into this mysterious PvE mode that we haven't seen yet. And the PvP you'll be able to access from Overwatch 1. So maybe it makes sense that it's so similar to Overwatch 1 because it's almost like a cross-game mode where players from both will be able to interact with each other. Maybe that's worth mentioning. But if you're expecting Overwatch 2 to be this huge, substantial change where it completely rewrites the rules of Overwatch, it's not. It's not it.
No, it's odd because they've kind of made, small changes to a number of heroes. Yes. So, for example, like May and Cassidy and Orisa, which again, we'll get into that. But for me, as kind of like more of a casual player now, I would have considered myself quite like a hardcore player back in the day. But now I'm coming back to it, I kind of just want to have fun. It feels like some of the changes are very geared towards players who play the absolute, the crap out of this game. They're looking to grind the ranks out or whatever. But I don't know, they've stripped a bit of the personality or like a little bit of the flavor out of these characters to the point where their kind of skill sets don't quite gel. They might gel for players who only care about, spitting out the most optimal amount of damage. But for example, Mei, she's got this gun, which before you'd hold left click and she'd fire like this snowy mist. And if you held it on an enemy character for long enough, it would totally freeze them in place. And then you could kind of press right trigger and she'd fire like an icicle. And it was just really cool to be able to like freeze a character, I suppose CC them or crowd control them, as you'd say, and just like dink them in the head and do like tons of damage. It's just like a really cool, slightly like troll thing you could do as a Mei.
So fun.
And that's not a thing anymore. That doesn't exist in the game. Now, if you hold left click, her snowy mist will just damage and slow an enemy. There's no sort of freezing thing. And again, you might think that's excellent if you're like a really veteran player of Overwatch and you want to make sure that this game sort of runs like clockwork, I suppose, in this new 5v5 format with all the changes and stuff. I don't know, just to like a casual player and someone who's returning, it doesn't feel right. Like there's something just slightly off about not having that Mei factor to me anymore.
I totally agree. I had the same experience when I was playing as Cassidy, because they've replaced his stun grenade with like a magnetic grenade, and it removes that loop that you've spoken about. And that was what was so exciting about Overwatch when it came out, is every hero felt complete. It felt like they had these interesting little loops that were unique to them that you had to master in order to play as them. So Cassidy's, you would roll, you would throw a stun grenade, and then you would shoot all 6 bullets and you would take down a DPS hero. And with Mei, like you say, you'd freeze them, you'd dink them. And it kind of feels like, because they've done these balance changes so heavily, they have stripped away that core loop that made them so fun. And it's interesting because I will say the new hero, Sojourn, they feel very complete in the way that those heroes did in Overwatch 1. She has some really fun abilities that all line up with one another. You can do this like really fun slide and you can leap out of it, so you can like get close to danger or move away from it. She's got this ability that basically it makes like an area of effect that does double damage, so you can trap tanks in it and then basically do tons of damage. She's very similar to Soldier in that she just has like this machine gun, but there's like a slight delay on her bullets, so you have to aim really precisely in order to hit anything. And you can charge up that gun to then do like a devastating right-click shot, which allows you to take down enemies and do like a finishing punch, basically, if they're being healed. And I feel like because she's been designed with Overwatch 2's balance in mind, she feels very complete. Whereas these existing characters, like you say, feels like something's missing. And I think that's something that they're really going to have to step up with to make this game feel more fun. They might have to redesign heroes completely, which is no small amount of work, but I do think in the long run, if we can get back to that feeling of every hero has its place, I think that'd be really beneficial. Because like Widowmaker, weirdly, has had no changes whatsoever and feels borderline useless in Overwatch 2, which is a shame. And she clearly needs work doing, but I don't want to see her just have one ability changed and then, that core loop removed, because that is a problem, I think, with this game.
Yeah, I think they're, at least in my opinion, they seem to be kind of moving away from where before you'd have these like crowd control abilities, like Mei, you'd freeze people, Cassidy, you could stun people.
Yeah.
And it kind of let, more kind of, I don't know, casual, or you're just chilling, you're just playing Overwatch, and you're kind of able to stop people in their tracks and just get an elimination sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's gone, or they're sort of stripping that back, and it feels like they want to make this like almost like a tougher game to play.
Yeah.
In my opinion, like they want characters to, I suppose, last a bit longer, and that requires you to have to aim a little bit more, which I don't know. I suppose, again, that kind of plays into this is more for the pros than it is just for your general dudes like us.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I really want to love this game again, because I love the world of Overwatch. I love when this game clicks. Oh, it's like nothing else. This is still an early in development experience, and I think there's a lot they could do to make this a bit tighter, a bit more enjoyable. And I think the core foundation, because it's based on that original game, is there, and it's great. Yeah, I think it's probably a good thing they're doing this. And also they released an article yesterday where they basically said, we've heard you and these are the things we're going to do, which is really good to hear. So they're open to feedback, and I still have high hopes that this will engage me for another million hours like the original game did. But shall we move on to talking about some more specific bits and pieces? In my notes here, I've just written Orisa is a beast, because my God, I did not like Orisa in Overwatch 1. I adore her in Overwatch 2. She is so fun to play. And again, it's this whole thing about feeling like a complete hero. So the first thing to mention is that it's 5v5 now, and each team can only have one tank. And because of that, the tank has sort of changed as a class. They're far more spongy. They've been given a huge health boost, a huge damage boost. And the role of the tank now feels like it's your job to get into a skirmish and to almost focus on the enemy tank, to take damage from the DPS, to be healed from the support. And if you're working together as a unit in that way, the tank is an essential role, and Orisa feels like the best example of the way that role now needs to be played. She can boost her health by almost like fortifying herself. She can throw a javelin, which is yeah. So basically they've removed her shields, which is a common theme across Overwatch 2. I think they're trying to move away from the shield meta, as I think it's known by pros. I'm a casual player, I'm speaking out of my comfort zone here. But now, instead of putting down shields, she just pulls out a giant glowing spear and just hoys it at the enemies. And if you connect like a headshot with like a DPS hero or support hero, like taking down a pesky Mercy with a javelin to the head from a long distance while they're airborne, feels like nothing else. Overwatch is at its best when it's a tug of war, and I feel like as a tank, Orisa really plays into that feeling. I played a couple of games where as Orisa, I was just hunting down the enemy tank, and then we were just having like this really fun elongated conflict where I was buffing, I was being healed, they were being healed, and it was a battle of attrition that felt so good to like get out the other side of it. It didn't feel frustrating. It didn't feel like the time to kill was too long. So yeah, Orisa, really fun. I think other tanks need a little bit of work. I was a D.Va main for a long time. I feel like D.Va doesn't feel quite right anymore. It feels like that battle of attrition I've spoken about doesn't quite fit with her skill set, but still incredibly fun. Enjoyed playing as all the tanks. Also, the role queue for the tanks wasn't as long as it was for DPS, so I was able to play as a tank a bit more.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't really get to play against or as Orisa at all, actually, which is quite strange. I think I came up against lots of Winstons. Winston was very popular in the games that I was in.
Interesting. I don't think I saw a single Winston.
Yeah, and I sort of wonder if, again, because I don't know if he's been reworked all that much. It didn't seem like it. Maybe some of his stats have been kind of sort of shuffled around. But he was always quite like, you know, you dive on kind of a back line, I suppose, and you just like whip out your laser cannon and just start like going at it. He seemed to match Overwatch 2's kind of new energy quite well. Like he seemed quite strong, like the kind of this more aggressive tank now. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't play a lot of tanks. I was kind of more trying out supports and some DPS stuff. But yeah, like you were saying, I think some tanks seem to match Overwatch 2 and some just aren't quite there yet.
Yeah.
But that's something that will change. They'll tweak things, won't they?
I hope so. They better not ruin D.Va, because then I will not go back. Still think the whole nerf this loop of D.Va is just the best. The only other thing I wanted to talk about really was the 5v5, which at first I thought was too slow, because there was quite a lot of times where the enemy team would melt my team, and then it felt like a lot of waiting around. I was playing a lot of Lucio when I first started the beta, and unlike Overwatch 1, where I felt like you always had a couple of heroes in the thick of it, and it was almost like a conveyor belt of carnage, 5v5 does remove that. And it feels like you do have to work together as a team. Otherwise, it's just one hero constantly going into the fray and just getting minced. And at first, I didn't like that. I thought it was too slow. I don't know. It just, the pace of it didn't feel right. But again, when I was playing last night and when everyone was working together as a team, it felt much better. It felt like regrouping and then rushing to the objective just before the timer counts down was giving it this elevated sense of drama, which is always the thing that I'm looking for in a multiplayer game. So yeah, I do like 5v5. I like how each role feels important now, like I mentioned before, but you're not going to get randos that are going to do that every time. And even in the beta, which is presumably populated by people who like Overwatch and have played Overwatch and understand the ebb and flow of an Overwatch match, you still had like Moiras who weren't healing people and tanks that weren't getting on the point, and it's just like, come on.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I kind of feel the same way. I quite like this 5v5 thing. I think it sort of does slow down things a little bit. You have to work together as a team, but as you say, the Overwatch sort of ness hasn't subsided. Like, it is still very easy for your team to get absolutely rolled and just snowballed constantly. Yep. That's still like a massive problem. And I would actually say it's, well, not a problem. It's like, you know, if your team isn't working together, that's what happens, right? But it feels like 5v5 has kind of like exacerbated that more.
Yeah, I'd agree
because
with that,
I don't know, I just feel like time to kill now, or at least because there's kind of less shields knocking around, it's much easier for your back line just to get absolutely destroyed if DPS is on fire. I don't know. It just, I feel like there needs to be some slight balance tweaks here to make sure that if your team isn't working together, especially if you're playing like solo queue as well, if you're just jumping in without your friends and stuff, I can just see it being an incredibly frustrating experience if you're not communicating very well or if your team just isn't gelling. So yeah, 5v5's okay, but a part of me also does just miss like the carnage of that one extra player. Just a little bit, even though it was extremely stressful, and that's why my blood pressure was just off the chains like a few years ago. Even when there were like loads of shields around and stuff, just having like 2 tanks and just kind of being able to hide behind them a little bit, you can kind of do your thing. Yeah, that's kind of gone now. Each fight kind of feels a lot more stripped back a little bit, maybe more refined, like an actual shooter, as opposed to just like a chaotic stream of people flying around and sometimes you're not really impacting a lot, you're just kind of shooting a tank and they're just healing back up, but you're just enjoying being in that moment of chaos. I don't know, that's kind of gone now a little bit. It feels more like each move is quite calculated.
I'd agree with that, because I think one of the things I found so appealing about the original game was that great decision to give you an elimination even if you only contributed like 1 hit. So it always felt like you were constantly involved, and I think that felt so compelling and so exciting. And you are right, I think the more that they polish the edges of this game, the better it probably becomes from a competitive standpoint, but sort of the less fun it gets for idiots like me that just was barely contributing, but I was having a laugh, and isn't that what matters? Or is there anything else you wanted to mention before I wrap up, by the way?
I would say, what I'm trying to say is it's hard not to make Overwatch 2 feel like Overwatch 1.
Yeah.
I think if you're kind of going into Overwatch 2 thinking that this is going to be, or even just expecting that it's going to be like this total kind of like earthquake of changes, like it's going to be this monumental new experience, I think you've kind of got to rejig it a little bit and just think like that's not what this is, and that's probably not what they could do. Like they can't just totally shake this game up. Like it kind of has to play like Overwatch. I've come to accept that a little bit because they are adding some new maps and these new heroes or whatever, but I suppose they have to kind of keep that Overwatchness like lurking around, even if they are kind of chipping away some of the edges and kind of turning it more into a shooter now. Or I suppose it was always a shooter, but it really does feel more like an FPS. And I know Counter-Strike is totally different from Overwatch, but it does feel like in Counter-Strike each shot counts. Like you really have to aim and you have to shoot, and people die in seconds. And I feel like Overwatch 2, not that it will ever reach that point, but it feels like it's kind of aiming for that. You need to make sure you're hitting your shots, and each shot really does matter now. Like people can just get absolutely minced really, really quickly. I feel like Counter-Strike is an incredibly focused game, and I feel like Overwatch is kind of taking just a very small little slice out of that. I also think it's much easier to, like if you compare it to something like Warzone, I feel like Warzone 2 is much easier to imagine. Like I don't know if Overwatch 2, it's very hard to picture that in your head, which I think is a problem. When you're playing the game, it's like you don't actually know what, at least because we haven't seen the PvE portion, but I suppose even that contributes to it. It's like I don't know what this final product is yet. Like I don't know what I'm playing. Like I think it's kind of like Overwatch 1.52. I don't know what this is. Whereas Warzone 2, in my head, I can picture that. It's really simple. It's like it's going to arrive with the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare, or whatever. They're going to probably totally, strip away all the guns, totally new arsenal, and of course, we're going to just get this one big map, this brand new map, and a bunch of new changes, and that's a lot easier. So when you're kind of playing that game, you're like, right, I know exactly what this is. It's familiar, but it also feels like fresh and brand new. And I think this is maybe part of the trouble with Overwatch 2. It's like, is this fresh? Well, no, not really. Like they're sort of tinkering with something that kind of already exists, and yeah, it's just hard to, even now I'm speaking, it's kind of jumbling all over the place, because that's how I feel about the game right now. I just don't know where I stand with it and where it's going to go. I suppose until we see this PvE side and how that kind of feeds into the PvP, or if they're going to be totally separate, who knows. But I am excited to see where the game goes. I am, because I think I always will kind of be invested in Overwatch in some way or another, even if I haven't played it in years and years. So yeah, we'll see where it goes, especially with this PvE stuff.
I think that's a very measured response and opinion, to be honest. I agree. And it is interesting you mentioned Warzone, because Call of Duty would release a new game every year with very minor changes, but I guess they would leave a lot behind.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's part of the perception of Overwatch 2, is that they're bringing everything with it. It's tough. I think they've both shown their hand a bit too early, but also they've needed to, because there's a lot here that I think they needed feedback on. I know that the Overwatch team has had a lot of people leave recently. Maybe the team just needed to reset a little bit and just get some public opinion for their own internal understanding of what this game is. Did you realize that when you were selecting heroes, some of the avatars for the new version, but you couldn't play as that new version?
No, I didn't. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so like
That's
Reinhardt's
strange.
little portrait was the Overwatch 2 version of Reinhardt, where he's got like longer hair and a bigger beard, but then the default skin for Reinhardt was still just the default skin for Reinhardt. This really was an early version of this game, and I'm sure they will probably do a lot of these tech tests over the next 12 months or whenever, because this game does not have a release date yet. But yeah, it might be a case of when they next show it off, it is a more complete thing, and they say, here's the PvE, here's the PvP, here's our vision. We're going to just tell you what we envisage Overwatch 2 to be. That's the biggest problem for me, is this game, despite the fact I've now played like 5-6 hours of it, I still don't quite understand what it's going to be. But I love that first game so much. This game, because it's built on the foundation of that, I'm really keen to see what they do with it, whatever that may be. Also, Orisa is great, and I'm an Orisa main now.
I think our thoughts align, first of all, actually, towards the end there. But also, I can't remember who I played a lot of. I think I really liked Cassidy back in the day. I absolutely loved him. Yeah, and Torbjorn. I do. I'm one of those people that you just set up the turret, sit back, and the right click with a little I don't know what he fires, or little shards of like molten lava, whatever. It's so satisfying when you land a little dink. Honestly, if the PvE side has just like a Torbjorn like tower defense style
can you imagine?
thing, that would just be incredible.
That would
win me over.
See, this is the thing. There's so much potential for that PvE. I'm really excited to see what they do with it, because I think that could be something really special. Just like a massive co-op game with 30-odd playable characters who all fulfill a different role. That could be
It could
immense.
be really good, couldn't it?
Thank you very much for watching. Have you had a chance to play Overwatch 2 for yourself? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For more PC goodness, check out Rock Paper Shotgun, and I'll see you soon.